We are recording this webinar. The promise or the pledge that we give to you is that we will take only 30 minutes of your time in order to give you this very brief introduction to how RightsWatch addresses GRC compliance and requirements. We do have a couple of slides to show, and at the end we will have a Q&A session. So the plan today is for you to be in listening only mode, so you're muted centrally, but at the end you will have the opportunity to ask a couple of questions to myself, and I'll make sure that I'll try to answer those to the best of my knowledge. In the interim, you can use, and you're welcome to enter questions anytime using the Q&A feature on the GoToWebinar control panel that you should have on the right side of your screen. Nonetheless, we are recording this webinar, and we will upload this recording to the watchfulsoftware.com website under the resources area, if not today, tomorrow, and you will have access to the recording of this webinar. So without further ado, let me start by emphasizing the fact that we do live in a world in which all of these that you can see on your screen do happen. The idea is that you can be conscious about external attacks by all shapes or forms that those can come by, but you also should be aware that those attacks, being intentional or not, may come from the inside, and this is commonly known as the insider threat. And the threat, an insider threat, is not just the person that wants to do you harm. It's also someone that does a mistake and sends the email to the wrong recipient, and that leads into repercussions that are severe from a reputation standpoint and from a financial standpoint to the company or the enterprise or the organization that person belongs to. So this is the world that we live in. This is the headlines that you see all over the world. Every other week you see some of these. How are you to address these and not be able to be featured in one of these headlines while still addressing the compliance issues and requirements that you have from a GRC perspective? I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how to mitigate this threat, how to mitigate this risk, which is commonly known as the insider threat. And when you're talking about insider threat, you may be tempted to say, well, I don't have that. I don't see it how possible it is for me to be a target of an insider in my organization. But the reality is that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And someone doing a mistake and sending an email to the wrong recipient, or saving a document to the wrong repository, or having his or her laptop stolen, etc., that's an insider threat. It's not it's not the voluntary insider threat. It's not something or someone that wants to do you harm, but it's someone that involuntarily does the same result or makes the same result. And it's not really about databases anymore. I mean, when you think of your PII, your PCI, and all the other P's and I's in the world, they are secure up to a point. They are secure and controlled up to the point that they leave the secured and controlled environment of a structured database, of a structured format. Once they become, an email, or once they become, an unstructured data file format, the typical example would be a Word, Excel, PowerPoint, PDF, but you can really think of, other file formats like CADs or CAD drawings or image files or video files or any other type of file format you can think of. Those still bear and still hold those P's and I's, those PIIs and PCIs, etc., and they're still sensitive, and they're everywhere. They're not just inside the database, etc. The other truth is that hackers aren't the greatest threat anymore. Again, they are, in the fact that they are still want to hack you. They still want to steal your information. They still want to leverage that information for their own benefit. Being that benefit personal, or just trying to sell that information to someone else that could give them money for it. But you still need to also look, not neglect, someone from the inside, as I've said, that is trying to leverage that information when going to work for your competitor. Today someone works for you, has access to sensitive information, tomorrow maybe don't. So you need to make sure that you're able to control that person when it ceases to have any responsibility in your company. The access and the controls that that person has over that sensitive information cease also to be active. And the last but definitely not least point here is that this does not have to keep on happening. And the point is, there are technologies, there are ways out there that you have to control and to protect information, even from the insiders and from those, even from the outsiders, but also the insiders. And that perspective, or that paradigm, if I may, it's called data-centric security. Data-centric security is really a combination of four things. The way we see it is a combination of four things. One, on the top should be governance, the way that you have to apply your governance model, the way that you have to apply the compliance, the requirements that you are mandated to apply and be compliant, from a marketer, sector regulator, or even from your own internal audit departments, etc. The way that you have to apply the governance model, being it an information security policy or something else, that you need really to apply it. To be able to apply a governance model from a data-centric perspective is one of the key points in the equation, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Classification on the left basically means that you need to label the data. You need to be able to emphasize and be explicit on which data is sensitive from which data it's not. All of us are using BYODs, and all of us are using, everything to control and handle information that may be sensitive in nature, but just may not be, because it's just me sending an email to my wife or my son, or etc., asking her or him to go to lunch. So how do you separate that, and how do you make that explicit that that certain information is of a sensitive nature and other information is not? Loss prevention in the bottom means that you're controlling what, when, and how that data is to flow and to be handled. Basically, you're controlling where can that data go, what can that data be doing. Do you want it to be flagged? Do you want it to be quarantined? Do you want to stop things from happening? Do you want to warn users that things are happening, etc., etc., etc.? So apply policies so that you can then control where the data flows, etc. Protection on the right means encryption, means digital rights management, or as others would say, enterprise digital rights management or information rights management. Typically what we mean here is apply the breakdown of controls of what can a user do with this file that is typically known to be used on digital media, like music files, etc. But apply that to the enterprise, and apply that to your Words, Excels, PowerPoints, emails, CAD drawings, notepads, etc., etc., etc. A combination of these four things enables you to enhance compliance, decrease your liability, apply policies, and uphold those policies. And when you do that, you're really doing a data-centric approach. You're saying, I don't care where the data is. I don't care, who's handling the data, an internal user, an external user, or whatnot. I'm always in control of what's going on. So when you do that, there are 5 things basically that you need to do in order to be successful in an implementation of a GRC initiative. First, you need to, as I've said, identify which data file, which information is sensitive from that information that it's not sensitive. Then you need to be able to classify that data. So you need to be able to label. You need to be able to make sure that from a digital perspective, and even when that digital file becomes a hard copy, you need to label and watermark and tag and place colors and borders and images and whatnot, whatever makes more sense from an information security policy on those files, so that the user becomes aware. The corporate liability decreases because the company is stating the obvious. It's just saying this is sensitive and you should be careful when handling this file. And this is done via marking and tagging. Is done by also applying custom properties to the file, so that even it's not just the human eye or the human nature that is able to better reason over the files, but also other systems in your enterprise will reason better and understand better that data, because that data has other elements that will make that unstructured file more known. So any other policies that are applied downstream will be more efficient and more effective. Protection in this case means the encryption, means the policies, means also the DLPs, means a lot of policies that can be centrally defined and applied locally, so that your users, when they're sending an email or saving a file or working with a specific content or working in a specific repository, transparently to them, they can have policies applied, and it's not just something that sits in the background that no one ever sees, no one ever understands what that system is doing. Is really putting it in front of the user, so that the user can reason over and understand what is going on. Protection in this case, as I've said, means encryption, means digital rights management or information rights management, whatever you want to call it, but also means DLP in the sense that you can block things from going on. You can warn users of things that just might be against corporate policy, etc. And tracking and reporting means to log, means to really understand what happened, so that you can go back, and even in real life, in real time, you can go back and see, look, who did what, when, and how. If you log actions from users when they are handling sensitive information, basically you're saying, look, I am able to understand and be capable to reproduce, and I'm also capable to reproduce what happened in the interim, since this data file was initially created, an email or a doc file or whatever, until the moment in time in which something happened, or I just need to have control and I just need to have a notion on what happened. Wherever that file is, and this is the beauty, it's not just about controlling the network, it's not just about controlling the file while it sits on your network, while it sits inside your walls of protection and defense. It's wherever that file is. So let me give you a scenario, and I'm going to spend a little time here just to give you the best understanding possible of a real life scenario of a company or companies using RightsWatch for GRC purposes. So Paul is an information security officer, and Paul has an obligation every once in a while, every month or so, to extract information from a database. It's a customer information, turn it into an Excel spreadsheet, and when that information is extracted out of that controlled environment, which is the database, it becomes an unstructured file. It becomes an Excel spreadsheet in this case. But that Excel spreadsheet is of sensitive nature because it has, account information, identifiable information, customer-related data. Paul is required to send this Excel spreadsheet, again, every month or every quarter, to as an attachment to an email to someone in his organization. So Paul works in a bank subsidiary, for example, and he needs to send this Excel spreadsheet every month or every quarter to HQ, to someone in HQ that deals with risk, etc. And he needs to, send it by email, an Excel spreadsheet by email. So Paul clicks on the new email button on Outlook, for example, and attaches that Excel spreadsheet. As soon as that Excel spreadsheet is attached to that email, and without asking Paul to do anything, or without asking him to go into complex workflows or click a bunch of buttons or extra options or combo boxes or anything like that, basically that Excel spreadsheet becomes automatically classified, automatically protected per the information a corporate information policy that that company has. So basically, if that information is found to have PII, as it does, or account information, as it does, it automatically becomes classified with a certain level of classification, and it also applies policies are automatically applied in the form of digital rights management policies, or even in the form of DLP policies, etc. So in this case, for the sake of the example, we're applying classification and we're applying digital rights management to the Excel spreadsheet. And Paul mistypes the email address and clicks the send button. So Paul is supposed to send this to Jane something, but instead of typing the proper address, Paul trusts the autocomplete function on Outlook and mistypes the email address and clicks the send button. So ultimately, if you don't have any protection, you could have some protection here already, because you know that the Excel spreadsheet is protected. You know that that attachment is protected. Now, what RightsWatch can also do is prevent the email from being sent, because RightsWatch recognizes that the email address that Paul typed is wrong. So RightsWatch recognizes that corporate policy is not being followed, because corporate policy states that that Excel spreadsheet should only be sent and shared with a certain person on the headquarters of this bank. So RightsWatch is protecting not only the attachment, the Excel attachment on the email, but also the email body in itself, and applying some DLP type of policies that will prevent the email from going. So the user cannot click the send button, because the send button is grayed out. The send button is not active for the user to click send, because RightsWatch recognizes that the recipient are not the allowed recipients to this email. So RightsWatch informs Paul of that fact, and then allows him to correct the mistake of the recipient, or other options that you may wish to present Paul with. Basically, you're addressing the issue that is triggering the policy, which is the fact that the recipient is the wrong one. And then Paul is allowed to send that email to the risk and compliance manager, who receives the email. Now, this person receives the email as stated by the GRC policies in the company. And this person does something that, maybe it should not be doing. Basically, it saves that Excel spreadsheet into, a cloud-based drive like Dropbox or any other, or, it basically forwards that or to his Gmail account or something like that. And this person is, again, maybe, in this case, let's assume that it is going against corporate policy, because it should not be allowed to save highly sensitive information, highly sensitive Excel spreadsheets in this case, with personal identifiable information or account information into them, and save those into cloud-based drives. Now, in this case, we're using Dropbox. It could be something else, or they're not allowed to share that information with their Gmail accounts or something like that. So RightsWatch prevents and blocks the email from doing the user, in this case the risk and compliance manager, from doing this. In this example, and this is just an example of what we can do, you can see that something that the users have to do, there's a lot that can be going wrong in the interim, and RightsWatch is helping the users in following the process that is established in the company, without asking them to click on extra buttons, without asking them to go into complicated workflows, etc., and forcing the process to go as foreseen and without allowing any part of the process the files or the emails to be shared or saved into places and being used by people that should not be able to do so. But when you talk about GRC, you can talk about multitude of requirements, multitude of compliance requirements that you may have. I have 3 or 4 here for you. The first one is PCI DSS, and PCI is a very comprehensive guideline and requirements. Now, RightsWatch does not address the entire set of requirements from PCI DSS, but some of the things that it does, it helps you be compliant and address some of the requirements of PCI DSS. So the PCI, demands that the usage of data should be encrypted whenever you're talking with credit card holder information, etc. And that information should be secured and stored, in a secure location, so to speak. And that you need to have in place methods to control the access to that data. Now, I'm not going to be comprehensive. I know a little bit, or we know a little bit about the PCI DSS, but those people that study this thing into the exhaustion, they can tell you that there is a lot more to do and there's a lot more to know about PCI. Now, what we are here to tell you is that just by deploying RightsWatch, you are immediately meeting some of the requirements of PCI DSS, because you're avoiding the liability of risk due to data loss or theft. Because as you've seen before, if you're applying controls over the data, independently where that data file is, you're immediately putting a barrier into the loss or theft of that information. Even if the email is lost, even if the file is lost or stolen, no one can have access to that. So you're ensured that that information is protected. And it demands, and by using RightsWatch, the demand that companies and enterprises have to exchange information with external parties can really be met, because honestly, it's not the fact that you need to control the equation, you need to control the ecosystem. You're just changing information or exchanging information with internal or external parties, and all those people do is double click that file or double click that email to open it. Now, if they are entitled from a role-based perspective, from a role-based access control policies, if they are entitled to open that email or to open that file, great. If not, they will not be able to. And this persistent protection is done while in transfer, in storage, or while the information is at usage. When you're dealing with HIPAA, and again, I don't want to be very comprehensive in addressing HIPAA. There's an entire semester in college just to address, HIPAA requirements, etc. But bottom line, their health information should not be shared unless to the minimum that it allows to conduct business. So that personal information, personal health information, PHI, should not be shared with people that should not have access to. If you want to summarize it in a way, that is basically it. So you can allow with RightsWatch PHI to be automatically classified and protected. Now, you can label which information is sensitive and what's not, and you can protect that information. Now, by applying RightsWatch, you can apply protective markings and labels that decrease corporate liability. So basically, you're explicitly saying that this is information that falls into HIPAA and should not be shared or should not be used by those that should not have access and should not have access to it. Now, applying DRM, applying digital rights management or information rights management, again, as the way you want to call it, gives you the ability to control the access and the handling of the file that contains that PHI. Now, I can read, but I cannot print. I can print, but I cannot forward. I can forward, but I cannot copy and paste from that, etc., etc. And this is to say that only those that have access to it will see it. Initially, will be able to read that information. And then if they're able to read it, what can they do later? And then it also delivers a comprehensive audit trail, as I've said. ISO 27001, again, very comprehensive mandate that some companies need to follow. Now, the same principle applies. You're preventing the inadvertent data loss just by applying Rights Watch, even if that information is completely outside of your network. You're also educating users on how sensitive the data is and ensuring that they adhere to the security policies. You're implementing something that is derived from the military called the multi-level security model, which is to extend the information security management system, deeper into the reality of your organization. Again, Rights Watch will not enable you to be compliant with everything that ISO mandates, but it helps you up to a point in which that you need to control the information that is being handled. You need to classify the information, and you need to make sure that only those with the appropriate security clearance will in fact have access to it. You will be able to classify and protect information that requires special handling, etc., etc., etc. In the UK, there's a particular and an interesting case called the government security classification scheme that dictates and mandates that there needs to be 3 levels of standardized classification across the UK. And that's official, secret, and top secret. Now, Rights Watch, this used to be called something else. It used to be called the GPMS. Now it turned into the government security classifications. In the UK, again, this is a UK only. And Rights Watch can be supplied, can be delivered with a pre-made security classification schema to ensure that these 3 classifications are there already. Now it also allows to adding extra descriptors, customized tooltips, and and other classifications and custom configured test labels, etc., etc., etc. Then to customize it to the particular requirements of agencies, local authorities, police forces, where the GSC needs to apply in the UK. So we've reached out the end of this very short, as I promised, webinar. We do now have a Q&A session. I'm open to take any questions that you were able to introduced on the panel. With me, I have Patricia. Patricia will help me with any questions that may have come into the panel. Patricia?
We have no questions at this point.
Okay, so this is always tricky to ask these questions, so we know we're used to this. Thank you for joining this webinar. As I've said, we will be publishing this webinar on watchfulsoftware.com. If you want to reach out to us, just send us an email to info@watchful.com. If you want to see this in action, because we didn't have that much time, we did not do a demo or anything of the sort, but, you can always request to see this live, and you will be receiving an email with the link where you can get, to watch the recording on demand and even to have access to the slide deck that was presented. Thank you very much. Hope to see you next time.